There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens.
That's right. I didn't know how else to add to that. It's the word of God, so you can't really add to it. We are talking about why it pays to wait on God. We are your host, Nick Smith.
And Kylie Jo Smith, and today's episode is called Spring Forward.
Hey, everybody. So hopefully you sprung forward already. Hopefully if you're listening to this, then you're hearing me. Wait, I can't say if you're listening to this
because they are listening.
It's kind of redundant to say.
If you're listening to this, then you hear what I'm saying.
Then
you're listening.
And then listening's happening, and otherwise I wouldn't be talking to anyone. Hopefully you sprung forward and you were dealing with daylight savings time.
Is it sprung or sprang?
Spring did, I think. I think it's
Sprung?
Sprung did.
Sprung. Our son would say sprung. He likes to say, like the word broke. He says brook.
Brook.
It's really fun. It's really adorable.
Hopefully you sprung forward and are ready for all the goodness that God has for you. But we were talking earlier this week, and we were talking about, sorry, calm it down.
Sound effect.
We were talking about the season that God has us in and how God prepared us for this season.
Yeah, it was, we were in training, I think. We were talking about, so if you don't know already, we are at the Milton Hershey School. And one of the things that we have been learning is kind of how the programs work. So programs in student homes, a little bit of the schedule that students are expected to follow every single week. And it's so wonderfully structured in a lot of ways. And so we were learning this, and we were kind of discussing it with our trainers, and at one point Nick leaned over and was like, oh my goodness, this is like an answer to prayer.
Yes, and not that I'm some weirdie and I sit there, Lord, please give me structure.
Please, Lord, plan out every hour of the day for me.
But if you don't know this about me, I'm pretty. No, I
knew that about you.
I fly by the seat of my pants a lot.
Also knew that.
Yes, and I don't plan very far in advance. I'm very good on dealing with things when they come up. But you give me like a week and be like, plan this week. I'm like, I don't know. At some point I'm going to do work.
And I'm the opposite. I'm like, please plan every hour for me. Like I'd love to know what I'm expected to do.
Kylie Jo's great
increments.
At long distance or
long term.
And I'm great at the short term, which is why we work great together.
Yes, it's a good system.
And so, but during the last season we were in, we had with our schedule in full-time pastoral ministry, with homeschool, the way that we had it set up, with just the way life was, there were always moments where we just didn't know what we were going to be doing. Like we would have a plan, and then something would happen, which ministry happens in the interruptions, and we know that. Like when something interrupts you, then you just got to deal with it in the moment. But we were so frustrated because we were looking for a semblance of regular.
Yeah, and I think in COVID times, we keep hearing everyone saying, let's get back to normal. Back to normal, right? We all want to get there. And for us, we actually kind of laughed because once the pandemic hit, at the stage we were at in our life, it was like, this is actually like, it's okay. Like
we can calm down.
Yeah, we can maybe find a semblance of normal. We can find something that gives us that balance. And in ministry, it's really hard for those of you that are in ministry, vocational ministry, especially serving as pastor or really any type of official leadership. Like your life belongs to the church in a lot of ways. Now there are boundaries you have to put in place, and
of course,
I think our family, we've learned that we've learned the art of putting boundaries in place. But as far as prioritizing our schedule, and being able to keep it consistent, because we've also had so many transitions throughout the seasons, and had different roles that we've played in different communities. Like it's really hard. It was really hard to do. It was frustrating. I remember there was a point I was like, I am so done making a meal plan.
Yeah, because we couldn't stick to it.
Like there's this happening, and a lot of it was a blessing. It would be like, oh wow, like I don't have to have this meal plan. There's going to be things happening at the church. There's going to be like, but at the same time, it made it hard for me to like enjoy the process of homemaking. Yeah. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even like get a handle on this. And I would feel selfish for wanting the schedule to go according to our family's plan.
Yeah. And I deal with a lot of the control issues in my own schedule, my own life. And there would be so many times where I would be looking at my schedule. I'm like, well, why did I even write this down? Like, why did I plan to do these things? And if you don't know how ministry works, like if you're not in vocational or active ministry, you can have a 9 to 5 if you want.
Sure.
You can set your work hours, you can set your office hours, and you can only be in the office during those times. And if people want to meet you at that point, that's awesome. But that's not shepherding. Like, that is professional ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not actually shepherding, because the shepherd has to be with the people. And again, as Kylie already said, that's not a free pass for no boundaries.
Right.
But as a pastor, or as someone who's in vocational ministry, really just as someone who's in ministry, as a human being, you're doing life with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you know, even now, if someone were to call and say, "Hey, Nick, I need you. There's something major going on," it would add an interruption in my day. The only difference is when you're a pastor, people just assume you're standing by waiting for a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just say, "Oh, pastor's got nothing to do. Let's go take care of this. Invite him to this thing."
And that's not an exaggeration. Like, there truly is an idea that,
Yeah.
especially in rural ministry, which has been the context we've been in the most,
Yeah.
there's an understanding that, pastor doesn't have anything to do but sit in his office all day and wait for people to come to him.
Yeah.
Not realizing there are a lot of administrative duties and other things that fall on the pastor.
Or like visitation that I already have scheduled.
Right.
Or,
or in your case, like, there's classes that
Mm-hmm.
I have to sit and watch online that I have to report on. I have to do assignments. And when you tell people those things, a lot of times, because we're so used to that 9 to 5 thing, where it's like, you have a job, you go to the job, you report while you're at your job, you do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you go home, you don't expect your boss to call you or for your
Or
coworker
coworker.
to call you and be like, "Hey, I need your help with this thing." It's like, I'm not on the clock right now.
I'll see you tomorrow.
And that's a blessing and a luxury, I think,
Of jobs.
of the traditional job. And certainly, like, we're stepping back into some of that, and that, like, okay, well, while you're on duty, this is the time where you're working. When you're off duty, you're not.
Then you're not
And you're not responsible for the job things when you're off duty. But all that to go back to the structure thing, like, there is a beauty in order and structure that I think it's in God's word. I mean, there's an order to the way he created things, obviously we see such beauty in God's created world, and it's ordered, and it's, a lot of times it seems chaotic to us, but it's very methodical to him.
Well, and we're what am I trying to say? We're born with an innate and an enemy.
I'm trying to pronounce every letter in that word. And an AT.
Oh, we're born with an innate desire for structure. Kids, as much as kids say they hate rules, kids thrive on rules. Actually, when we moved, we had to change our normal dinner routine, because we had like Taco Tuesday and Waffle Wednesday, where we did breakfast.
I missed that.
Yeah, like we did. And Isaiah got so used to it that when we moved, he was like, "It's Wednesday. Why are we not having waffles?"
Yeah, it was, and it's convicting, because it was like, oh wow. And this goes back to part of the reason we were so hungry for structure. For me personally, it was once we knew with Isaiah having autism that this was something that would help him.
Yeah,
like having a regimented thing every single day, every single week. I really wanted it even more. I was like, well, if this is going to make my son thrive, and it's going to, like, help him be successful, and, like, a productive member of society, I really need to have this for him.
Yeah.
But it was just so frustrating every time we couldn't, because he would notice it. Anytime we would have, like, a couple of weeks of normal, and then we would have to change it for something, he would be like, "Wait a minute, this isn't the way it is.
Why are we not
this
doing
is
things
unstable?"
Exactly.
And you could tell there was, even though he wasn't saying it out loud of like, "I'm feeling very anxious here. This is making me feel unsettled." It was obvious in his behavior that, like, okay, there's something that's not right, because he's used to it being this way, and now it's changing for no apparent reason.
Yeah, there was a definite lack of security. And what God did, what's interesting is what he did in our hearts prior to that season of ministry. When I was working a regular 9 to 5 job, I remember so many times being like, I just want to have the freedom to go and do what I want when I want to do it. I don't want to have to be here, clock in at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and then, which nobody wants to get up at 5 a.m. First off, it's terrible. And if you're like one of those people like, yes, I do.
Okay, John Wesley.
Have fun with that.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, John Wesley, like, you wake up at 4:30, you're late.
Singing hymns. Go for it. Do it.
No, actually, I wish I had that in me. But anyway, but in that season, before we got into full-time ministry, God was preparing my heart for what the next season was going to look like. And so he was already purposing my heart to be ready to receive what that next season was.
Yeah.
And when we stepped into full-time ministry, I remember feeling so much freedom and so much like, yes, this is what I was needing for this time. And being able to wake up in the morning, go in my office, drink my coffee, do my devotions, go out, visit people, even had a little part-time job. I was dropping kids off at school for the school district. And I just saw everything as ministry, and every little thing I did was magic. No, I'm just kidding. Never mind. Everything that I did was ministry, and I was so focused on just the Lord in that moment, and I was just going where the Spirit was leading. But then when we had our 2 children and we had to work in school and all this other stuff, I just felt, I was like, okay, this isn't working anymore.
Yeah.
And God started like shifting. I remember the shift in our relationship, the way we talked about life, and the shift in my heart specifically, because I am so willy-nilly and free. But God was working on me in that season for now.
Yeah.
Because now we have, like, God has blessed us. Everything that we prayed, we're like, God, we need structure. He's like, okay.
It's not only built into the job, because again, the job that we have is not a job. It's a lifestyle. It's a commitment.
Yes.
It's a thing. Like
it's ministry still.
It's ministry. It's a lifestyle of ministry. It's what's that one called? What do you call it?
Ministry of presence.
Ministry of presence. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Nick.
You're welcome.
And so it's not only built into the job while we're on the clock, it's literally built into the structure of life here on campus. And we live with students. We live in like close proximity to other house parents. And so everyone understands the way this is supposed to function.
Yeah.
And it's not robotic. It's very just regimented and allows for wonderful structure and the building of relationship. But it's something that we're like, oh my goodness, this is what we needed.
Yeah.
And for not just for us to ease our hearts, but for our children and for their success and for our family to be able to function in a way that we feel productive. We feel like we're doing something together and we all know what's happening. That's one of the things that structure does.
Yeah.
Is it adds an element of predictability so that then when something is off, you can more quickly understand, okay, wait a second, hold on. We normally do this thing this way.
Yeah.
And why are we not doing it? Oh, because this is happening. Okay, well, why is this happening? And it eliminates all of those things that you could otherwise point to as problematic or as the cause of an issue, to say, oh, well, it's actually this. This is the reason. And I think it's been really interesting and really life-giving for me to see that and to start, as we're being more present in student homes, to be able to see like, oh, okay, this is why this structure works so well.
Yeah.
And it's not for any particular age group. It's from K through 12 that it works for and beyond. Like, it's one thing I'm like, man, I kind of would like to have this kind of regiment, like just for me as an adult.
We do.
Well, we do. Yes. But minus the school part.
Yes. Well, for some of us. Well,
yes.
And part of the thing that's beautiful about how God works in not just the structure, but how He prepared us for the structure. We were talking about spring forward. Like God, like prepares our hearts. He springs our hearts forward to that next season.
Yeah.
Even before we get there.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I deal with is when I'm in the season and God's starting to shift me for the next season, I'm not focused on where I am because I'm so focused on what that next thing is. Like I didn't want to finish or complete or perfect the things that were in heart at my first, my last 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
There were things that God wanted me to do there as He was making those slow modifications in my heart and in my mindset to prepare me for ministry. But as soon as I felt that slight shift, I was like, oh, okay, I'm there now. I'm in the next season. But I'm not there yet. Like God is just preparing me and getting me there. And even in the last season we just came out of, there was some of that as we discussed the longing for structure, the longing. It was like, man, I know this is what I'm needing because this is the direction I'm headed. But at the same time, like there's still things in that season you have to complete or like have to perfect. And I say complete and perfect, not that you're ever perfect or ever complete.
Yeah.
But
there's tasks and there's things that God has for you in that season where you're at right now, maybe. And as you're listening to this, see, I did the same thing. If you're listening to this, as you're listening to this, you may be like, I'm in a season and I don't know what it is that God has for me to complete. I don't know what it is that He's putting in front of me that I will not be able to experience the next thing until this is completed. And maybe it's a thing where you don't need to do it yourself, but He's doing it in you.
Yeah.
I feel like what was happening in me during the seasons before this was I was experiencing what one of my college professors called a divine dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Where I was just so fed up with the way I was doing it. And God does that with me a lot because I love to have that control and I love things to be the way that I want them to be.
Don't we all?
In my little sphere, I'm like, okay, this is where my things go. and this is how my things go. And it's like he's continuing to show me.
That was good. Sorry, I was just thinking like, not only this is where I want things, but this is how I want them to be, all the time. Like I want everything that is within my realm to operate
to function in this way.
That's
me. That's me all day. And like,
that's me too.
And not necessarily with people, but with like processes and things. I'm like, I want it to go the way I want it to go.
Yeah.
But he brought out of me this like really, Ecclesiastes talks about a time for love and a time for hate. And I've always thought of that as like between people. But honestly, there have been times where I'm like, man, I just really started to hate the way I was doing it. Like there was a time for me to just hate my own way and really be dissatisfied with what I was doing, to where I began to long for what God would have. And I remember saying like, God, you are going to have to make a schedule for me.
Yeah.
Because I cannot do it. Like this is not,
I can't even muster it up.
I can't. And like, I was so looking forward to getting this planner in the mail that my wonderful husband got me for Christmas. And it was on back order. And I was like, before we moved, I was like, it's not going to get here in time, because I wanted so badly to make this schedule. And God, he orchestrated it so beautifully that it ended up getting packed without ever being opened. So like we got it in the mail. I think one of us thought it was your book for school. So we just threw it in with another box of books. We get here and I'm like, I never got my planner. Oh no. And right before we started training, or as we were starting training, then I found it. And I wasn't able to even start the schedule I wanted to start until after we got here. And it was like, okay, God, I get it. Thank you for preventing me from starting something and setting myself up for failure.
That's so good. I think what you said about the season for hating, like getting so fed up with how you're doing things. One of the things I know about human nature, just know to be true, is we don't change until we have to.
Whew.
Right? Like it normally,
the
way it goes is we don't change till we want to, and we don't want to till we have to. And you will never change something that you can tolerate. And so God has to do that work in your heart. He has to prepare you, not only for the longing, but for the discontentment with where you are. He's got to stir the nest. I can't remember where it is in Isaiah, but he talks about God like an eagle stirring the nest in order to get the baby birds out. If the mama eagle was just like, look, there's food down there. He was like, so what? I'm cool. You bring me food. Yeah. Actually, the eagle has to make it uncomfortable in the nest so that the bird jumps out.
And it's crazy because the mother knows when the right time is.
Yes.
Even if the baby doesn't. Like she knows you can fly now. Like you're able to fly. Even if the bird is like, I don't know if I can do this, Mom. That's how eagles talk.
Is that how baby eagles talk?
I don't know, Mom.
Mom, I don't know if this is the right thing. I don't know if you did the bad.
Please don't push me out of the nest.
We're going to spend the rest of the day making that voice, just so you know.
But yeah, and like, even with like daylight savings, I'm not springing forward. I really don't like daylight savings. Most of the people I know don't like it. It's silly. Sense. There's only a few places that don't do it. Like, why can't we just be like those places? But one thing I do love is that through the seasons, like in between the times where we change the clock, the sun starts to like, because of where we're at, like in the cosmos, the thing, the little planet spinning.
Keep going. You're good. I think we're following.
Like, there's actually a shift that we see. We actually see the change in the daylight and the time before we have to change the clock to where we're being prepared every single day. Because like the sunset and the sunrise, I don't know if you notice this, they change. The time changes.
If you don't notice this, there's something going on in your life. Like you should know. I mean, like you should see like, lighter.
Oh wow, it's getting bright sooner in the day.
Yes.
Like we're about to get to this point.
Later.
Yeah. Like there's preparation that's happening, even if it's just a minute change every single day.
Just
and like
incremental.
There's
that's
so much
good.
grace in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Sorry, I was just talking over you, but I was talking with you. I was like,
Yeah. Wow. Huh? What?
High five myself for that one. You did great.
So Oh, sorry. Do you have anything to add?
God is good. No, in that incremental comment you made about minute by minute.
Yeah.
What God just laid on my heart was that process that we see. Like we don't know when God starts the change in our heart. We know when we notice it. Like, oh man, now I'm ready for that next season. But we never know when God's actually done with that change as well. Like when it's time to move, because there's just like with summer, like when it gets to summertime, at one point you look and you're like, oh wow, it's 8 p.m. and it's still bright out. But it didn't just start being bright at 8 p.m. that day. Yeah. But you just noticed it. Yeah. And at that point, it's not going to stop staying brighter later. So you don't know. I mean, we do know because we look at clocks and we know how the rotation there goes. But I mean, in our lives, we don't know how long those seasons last. Yeah. And so in that preparation that God is doing, when you do notice, let's just move into practicality, because I think this is important. When God does do the stirring in your heart and you notice it's time for a shift, it's time for a seasonal change, don't get so focused on the shift that you forget about the season you're in. That's good. Like, don't get so focused on what's coming that you miss what is.
Yeah, that's really good.
Take it away.
So Ecclesiastes talks about waiting on the Lord. It's one of the it's a really great book. You should read it sometime. But in
great author. Love the way he writes.
Love the way he writes. Super wise. But there's a section that talks about waiting on the Lord, and there's a blessing in that for us.
Yeah.
And you may be wondering, how do you wait on the Lord? Like, it's really a weird thing, like waiting. Am I standing here like, okay, God, any minute now,
make something happen? I'm waiting on you.
Because it also can imply that there's a time that's been appointed that God's late for, and that's not what that means.
Yeah,
God is always on time. There's a lot of songs about that, but it's also true. His timing, because he's outside of time as we understand it, he's not late.
Yeah,
he's operating in the perfect amount of time, but you may be impatient.
Come on.
But how do you wait on the Lord? Well, one of the things you have to do is acknowledge your desire to be in control of your own schedule.
Yes.
You gotta start there, acknowledging the problem, acknowledging the issue is not, well, God, you're taking too long. God, you didn't fix this in my life. God, you didn't give me the schedule I wanted.
Yeah.
Like, you can express that to him, but it doesn't make it true.
Yeah, the issue is not everything's outside of my control. The issue is I want everything in my control. Yeah. So don't stop pointing at others and realize the issue's in here. It's a heart issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Also, along with that, but it's just another part of practicality. Accept that you cannot make things happen the way you want them to. I'm speaking to myself.
When you want them to.
Or when you want them to. Accepting that is so important to being able to receive what God has for you. Like, in this season.
So good.
Quit springing forward to the next thing and thinking that you need to keep your eyes fixed there. Accept right now in this moment that I'm not going to be able to make this happen the way I want it to. I can cross all my T's, dot all of my I's, write it in the schedule book, and have it planned to a T. And still something will interrupt it. Like, it's okay to have a plan. And one of the authors, I read his book, All the World's a Stage.
Shakespeare. No, wasn't him.
No, it wasn't him. Oh, it's going to bug me. Anyway, read his book, and he talks about like having a plan for like a live performance, which live performances, anything can happen. Like, anything can go wrong, anything can go right. He says you have a plan, and then there's room for spontaneity in the plan. There's room, there's grace for you to, hey, I'm going to, I made this choreography, but I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to grab the mic this way instead of that way.
And talking about Tom Jackson?
Tom Jackson, thank you.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Because you have the plan in place, when there's something that happens, it's nuanced. It's not a complete interruption. And I know from my experience, not accepting that I couldn't make things happen prevented me from enjoying the moments of spontaneity.
Yeah, that's good. And I think all of this works together with this last point, which is I'm going to say it like this: you can only do what you can do. Right. So the thing,
good t-shirt.
It is. And I got this from John Gallagher, my father, because he said it all the time. I'm sure he didn't make it up, but at the same point, he drove it home. He owned it. He owns that saying.
Yes.
If something's outside of your responsibility if it's outside of your ability, it's not your responsibility.
Come on.
You can only do what you can do.
It's above your pay grade.
It's above your pay grade. So but that also means the things that are within your ability are within your responsibility. And so you can only do what you can do as a double-edged sword. You can't focus so much on the things that are outside of your control that you're forgetting about the things that you have control over. So for me, just as an example, praying for structure. Lord, I want structure next season. I want this. I want all these things that are completely outside of my control. But God says, I've given you things inside your control.
Yeah.
You have a gym membership.
There we go.
You have 24 hours.
Hey.
You have school books. You have all these things inside your membership or inside your sphere. Why are you not utilizing those?
Yeah.
So utilize the things that you can until God puts more in your control.
Yeah. And that's scriptural because Jesus talked about being faithful with little.
That's right.
He who is faithful with little will be faithful with much. And so that isn't that's not a tit for tat thing. It's not a prosperity gospel thing. It's an understanding of, are you stewarding your responsibility?
Yeah.
Like over the people and things and processes that you have before you, are you able to take care of those things? Because while you're waiting for God to give you bigger and greater, and you're like, oh man, maybe next year I'll have this. God's like, yeah, but are you even waking up at the same time every day, bro? Like,
Right?
I'm talking to myself.
No, I
Like,
need you to get off my head. I'm over here feeling all beat up.
are you even like, do you meal plan though? Like, are you even feeding your kids? Like, these are the
We
things
are feeding our kids.
we do
Just
feed our children.
don't call
They're
nobody
fed
else.
very well. Like, these are the things that I believe we have to ask ourselves. We do have to own our 10%.
That's right.
Or in some cases, 25%.
Yeah, whatever's your responsibility, own it. Own that.
Yeah.
And be faithful with what he's given you.
Yeah, and we're going to go more into just some of the things that this season is teaching us right now with our inner circle. Of course, we love to give them exclusive stuff.
Yeah, we do.
We've been in a new shift in our role here. We left training, and so we're just going to share a bunch of stuff with our inner circle because we love them, and they are the ones who
They've been walking with us.
Who've been walking with us through the
us.
craziness. So
yeah. So thank you guys so much. If you have taken anything away from this, first I'll give it back because it's not yours. Don't be taking stuff.
My goodness.
Sorry. I thought that was good. No, if you've taken anything from this, please share. Please share this episode with somebody. Let somebody know about the NixMyth podcast. We love to just get the word out, and we hope that this blessed you.
Yeah, this has been the NixMyth podcast. We hope you've gotten a dose of real life.
No myth. Be blessed.